Story and puzzle spoilers starting now. In my past 2 Blueprint story videos, I covered the main stories of the game. The Arindon and Fen conflict, the secrets of the Mount Holly estate, Mary and the Resistance, the Baroness Arave and her real will, the Red Letters, the Curse of Blackbridge, Simon's discovery of his family's past and his ascension to princehood. All of this incredibly rich story that's hidden throughout the estate. But one of the things that has made exploring this game so fun for me is the amazing amount of small, little details that flesh out this story and add personality to the characters. This video pulls together some of those odds and ends that I think are most interesting. It assumes you have knowledge of the main characters, the main story. If not, I have a link to my story videos in the description below. Otherwise, let's get going. We know that Mary's heist in the Royal Museum was successful. They stole the red crown of Fen and transformed it into a blue crown, a symbolic act of resistance. But what did the public know about this? We get a hint to that in the 4th red letter, the angry letter written from Mary's husband Daniel to Baron Herbert Sinclair. In the letter, it implies that the Fen government was at the very least suspicious that Mary was responsible for the theft of the crown, and kept that information from the public to avoid embarrassment. Baron Herbert Sinclair went along with this approach, never revealing the truth behind Mary's actions, and we know why. In a letter to Mary shortly before the heist, the Baron promises her that he will do everything in his power to shelter her son from repercussions or fallout from his mother's actions. But the Baron's towing of the country line did not sit well with Mary's husband Daniel. In his letter, we see Daniel wanted the truth about Mary's actions to be made public to everyone so that our countrymen could see the color of the flag she flew. Daniel accuses Herbert of thinking only of his name, only of his fortune, and says that by kissing the foot that treads upon her legacy, Herbert has betrayed Mary and her son. The letter ends with an amusingly catty domestic aside. Needless to say, we will not be coming for Christmas this year. Daniel was not the only member of Mary's family that harbored ill will towards Herbert after Mary's disappearance. Mary's cousin Courtney, and it seems her brother Rygard, go even further than Daniel in their accusations. Courtney became convinced that Herbert was involved with the disappearance in some nefarious way, having actually caused Mary harm. In the letter we find in the shelter safe, Courtney curtly acknowledges that she might be wrong and Herbert might have actually been supporting and helping Mary in her aims. It's definitely not an apology, and it seems to have not made much of an impression on Herbert, who, in his will, gives her and her brother Rygard each a cuckoo clock, frozen on the sacred hour of 1:30, because only time will tell when they are ready to slow down enough to appreciate the gifts bestowed upon them with the patience and wisdom that comes with maturity. Which is how Herbie calls people spoiled brats. We have a few other bits and pieces about the family. We know that Mary's uncle Lionel Epsen grew up in Featherfall Keep. This home had been in the Epsen family from before the Third Era, which is the start of the Desolé rule, meaning that the Epsens have been in the aristocracy in some way for generations. When Lady Clara and Lionel's father passed away, Lionel left the estate and was never seen from again. In his will, Herbert leaves Lionel Lady Clara's diary and the key to that diary, should he ever return. And finally, as a small family tidbit, if you've stepped foot in the dormitory, you've no doubt seen that Mary attended university in Costa Rica. There, she used carrier pigeons to communicate to her loved ones back at home, a method she would also use during the heist. The staff of Mount Holly is a constant presence throughout the estate, and we get to learn a decent amount of them through letters, pictures, and through the staff announcement board on the computer in the office. As you continue to pass days in the game, occasionally messages from the staff will be added to this announcement board. Some of these are addressed to Simon, like when they tell him they leave him a cupcake in the pantry for his birthday, or they'll offer him hints. If you pass a lot of days in the game, you'll start to see some of the staff expressing a desire to get back to work. Sure, they're on unlimited paid leave, but being held in limbo forever is not a nice feeling. In my playthrough, Simon's been doing this for about a year now, and it's kinda getting to them. Anne Babbage is the house manager, and she seems to pretty much run everything. In the morning, she's the one who drafts the room. She manages the staff, hires and fires. She's basically Anthony Hopkins in the remains of the day. She doesn't always get along with Hartley. In one of his letters, Herbert muses that after his passing, he thought about forcing Hartley and Anne to live together so they could continue to torture each other. Kirk Darren is the head of security. He was brought in soon before the heist by Herbert. It was both Kirk and Herbert who created the very dubious colored memos security system. Blue is true, red is false, except if it's written by hand, green is conditional, I think. Whatever, I'm assuming the goal was just to confuse people, and it worked for me. We also know that Kirk helped create the incognito bar, the speakeasy, for Denny and his bootlegging operation. In the letter there, we see that Bridget has been persuading him to help out. Then we have Mr. Randolph Moore, the lead lab technician and the person who administrates the Blackbridge computer network. Randolph is the kind man who sends Simon's letters via the mailroom. They appear over time, and then you could spawn more of them using the lab experiments. He is one of the few, or maybe only, staff who is fully in on Mary's plan. He helped set up the fake accounts in the Blackbridge network to throw the investigators off of Mary's tail, and he was supporting Caleb, Philip, and her while they were hiding in the estate. Among the staff, I feel like we get the biggest sense of Randolph because of the many letters he sends you via the mailroom. He seems earnest, nerdy, excited. At one point, he talks about his correspondence with Simon, reminding him of the exciting time collaborating with Simon's mother, Mary. He tells Simon, "I know she's proud of you." If you play the game past October 12, 1994, you will receive a message on the staff announcement board letting you know that Randolph Moore has retired from his duties, and Kimberly, his assistant, will take over his role. Kimberly was hired just a few months before Herbert's death. She was a Cinca employee and served as Herbert's executive assistant and was very well trusted by him. There was Bridget, who we also know supported Denny's bootlegging operation as bartender, but she isn't noted in Randolph's staff list, so seems to no longer work there. Christoph, the chauffeur, and this is a chauffeur outfit, right? Anyway, he also supported the bootleg operation and is still employed. There's Chef de Camp, who cooks everything, and I don't think we know anything else about them. And of course, Hartley, the Baron's friend and confidant, and personal valet for 20 years. Hartley seems to have some past as a gambler, or perhaps even a grifter, as indicated by an offhand comment in Lady Clara's diary. I'm going to use this space here to double down on my theory that Hartley and the Baron were more than friends, that they had some sort of romantic attachment, though it was not necessarily consummated. I'm basing that on the language in the letter's servant room and the tomb letter to Simon. I also just kind of have a feeling that the man who grew up in the, 30s under an oppressive government, who lives alone in a big house with no wife or children, is incredibly fastidious, really loves puzzles, and has an excellent stash, is gay. I mean, he's basically Dumbledore. The last individual I want to discuss a bit is Detective Bon Margle, who in my book wins the award for Best Agatha Christie-type detective name. On March 1st, 1987, soon after Mary's disappearance, the Fen Red Guard came to the Mount Holly estate to investigate. In preparation, Herbert removed key rooms from the drafting pool, and Mary and her compatriots hid, initially in the shelter, before they could be transferred to the underground safe house. The investigation was led by Detective Bon Margle. Bon Margle poured through the estate looking for clues from Mary. He read the books in the library, he drafted and searched each room. In a letter from Detective Margle to Herbert, the tone is polite, light, a bit amusing, almost chummy. Now, there's no evidence for this, and it's probably just me, but this letter makes me feel that maybe he's a little more sympathetic to Mary's cause than you would assume from his job. While she was hiding, Mary was inspired by Detective Margle to theme her new book around a detective character. This would become a new clue, the book that was filled with hints for Simon to uncover. In the book, the Bon Margle stand-in kind of tumbles through the rooms, reads books, tries to figure out anagrams, but in the end he comes up empty-handed. In an interview, Bon Margle called the characterization unintentionally accurate. We also know Bon Margle and the Red Guard visited the estate at least one more time on September 3rd, the day after the heist, for a second investigation. The Sinclairs were prepared, with Herbert telling Randolph to, quote, lock it down, lock it all down. Very action movie, Herbert. All of these wonderful individuals live on the planet Mora. The Et-sphere side of Mora houses 4 realms. There's Fen, of course, which 100 years earlier was Orinda Ares. Just south of Fen and sharing a landmass is Araja, a mystical and rainy land with a close connection to the ancestors. It's here that the ancestors of King Desolé III fled after Orinda Ares fell to Fen. The Old Tongue is common in Araja, and we see it used throughout the estate, one of the signs of the Sinclair family's true loyalties. North of Fen is Arch Ares, called the Land of Northern Storms. Arch Ares is an industrial powerhouse and runs a gigantic trade empire through their powerful navy. In the past, these realms were connected by a massive railway which enabled trade and cultural exchange between the realms. However, soon after taking over, the Fen leadership dismantled their part of the railway. Part of this was likely to hurt Araja by cutting off trade supply to them, since that's the place that the remaining Arindan royalty fled to, but it also potentially fits with an isolationist, militaristic approach. Nuance is the landmass just west of Araja and Fen. Nuance is a militaristic society, and they joined with Arch Ares in supporting the Fen revolution/insurrection. They are masters of air travel, and gifted Fen a dirigible in celebration of Fen's victory over Arinda Ares. Despite this, Herbert greatly respects the technological abilities of the country. In his postcard from Nuance, he says, "The soot-filled streets and skyscrapers are just as stirring to me as the mountains of Kora Rika or the beaches of Mora Jai." Both of which are in the Ore Sphere, which has a total of 3 realms. So Kora Rika is a snowy land of learning. It's where 3 of the Sinclair family went to college: Mary, Herbert, and I'm guessing Baroness Arave. The country has an academic culture and reputation. When they decided to add a regional variation on the Mora Jai boxes, the mechanics of what their square would do was decided by a committee and symbolically represents that process. When Herbert visits on his tour of the world, he finds that this is the only country with no porters. Everyone here must lift and carry their own items. East of Kora Rika is Mora Jai, and at this point you're probably familiar with their famous puzzle boxes that have traveled the world and are, just everywhere in the Blueprints late game. Mora Jai has an agricultural economy. And then finally, in the south, there is the very, very hot realm of Vera. It's a very spiritual land with a devout respect of the sacred circle, which we see on the classroom map. In Vera, you travel by turtleback, and are given a turtle as a temporary companion when you visit, which makes Vera my personal #1 vacation destination. And now, just a few random bits of lore. The 3rd king of Arinda was the last in the line of Oris, who was the original merchant king of Arindia and connected all the land. The 4th king of the land, the first after the Oris line, is the one who divided the large landmass of Arindia into 3 realms, one for each of his children: Arch Ares, Araja, and Arinda Ares. Alzara isn't just a fun reference to a very old Tom Hanks movie, but he was actually an Arajan soothsayer who served on the royal court of Ares. We learned from a blue memo that he was actually banished when a prophecy of his did not come to pass. I like this detail because it potentially sheds a wee bit of doubt on the visions he shows Simon, and it reminds us that even if the visions are accurate, the interpretation can always be wrong. Ever wonder where all this water comes from? I mean, I didn't, but here we go. The estate is built over 2 underground springs, which create the massive underground reservoir, and that reservoir eventually flows out via the waterfall on the south cliff face. Cinca, the Baron's company, was founded in 1933 and has 2 facilities, a lab in Reddington and a 16-story facility in Oris. That facility has 8 floors above ground and 8 floors below ground. In ancient Arindia, the number 8 was considered to be mathematically near perfect, and as a result we see it not just here but throughout the state, both in its regular form and also its symbolic form that looks like an infinity symbol. And the most important piece of lore in the game, the one that emotionally connected with me more than any other, the dogs in the kennel are named Carter, Thoughtless, Hot Sauce, and Drawbridge. Those are the story odds and ends that I found particularly fun or interesting, but that doesn't mean there isn't more to discover. To help with that, and as a thank you to everyone who has been supporting this channel in its very beginning stages, I've uploaded all of the screen grabs I used to research these story videos to a Google Drive link, which is in the description below. They're labeled and organized. It's not everything, but it's a lot, and they could serve as a resource to say, read a book you were never able to buy from the bookstore, maybe help pass that final exam, or read all of the blue memos. If that sounds cool to you, please consider subscribing, as I'm hoping to provide more things like that as the channel grows. And of course, if you enjoyed the video, drop a like or comment if you have something you want to add. The comments on the other videos have been excellent and very helpful. And as always, thank you all for watching.